Week 13 of the college football season, rivalry week, the final week of the regular season. We are one step closer to finding out who will be the four teams competing in this season's college football playoff. The 7 games on the docket this week: Iowa and Nebraska, the Iron Bowl, Alabama and Auburn, Florida State and Florida, North Carolina and North Carolina State, Kentucky and Louisville, Oregon State and Oregon, and wrapping things up with not only the game of the week, but the game of the season. Assuming there are no changes towards the top of the college football playoff committee ranking on Tuesday, number 2 Ohio State and number 3 Michigan. Before I get to my picks, I want to announce that I am once again hosting a Bowl Mania group this bowl season. I will leave the link to the group in the description box. If you'd like to play, feel free to join the group. It's going to be a good time this bowl season. The more people that are in it, the funner and more exciting it is. I'm hoping I do a lot better this season than I have in the last couple of seasons. Without further ado, let's get right into the Week 13 college football predictions. The first game on the docket this week, Iowa and Nebraska. Iowa clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game last week, clinching the Big Ten West, and they will be playing the winner of Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten championship game next week. Could they be possibly looking ahead to that game? While Nebraska, they are looking to get their 6th win of the season to become eligible to compete in the bowl season. And they have been so close the last 3 weeks. Close losses to Michigan State, Maryland, and last week to Wisconsin in overtime. And Nebraska got off to a strong start last week against Wisconsin. They went up 14-0 early in the game. But then Wisconsin, they did what they did best against Nebraska, and that is running the football. While they didn't run for as much yards as they do on average, the yards that they ran in that game on Nebraska were effective. The over-under for this game is, I believe, at a record low, 27.5 right now. So this game is anticipated to be low scoring. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about how this game is going to be 13-10, 10-7. But I do think that both of these teams are capable of scoring 17 points in this game. And I do think 17 points is what it's going to take to win this game. I do think there is a chance the over takes place in this game. I'm not somebody that bets, but I am open to at least giving my thoughts on what lines and over-unders are. But I have a feeling that they were going to make this so low to try to tempt people into going under based off of how these offenses have played all season. We know the defenses will hold their own. Iowa is 7th in total defense. Nebraska is 15th. Iowa is only allowing 12.4 points per game, which is 3rd in the FBS. Now, I am surprised a little bit Nebraska is a 1.5 point favorite. And I think part of that is because the home team is getting the 3 points. But I think Iowa wins this matchup in what is an upset right now based off of the sports books, but in actuality is not an upset. I'm going with the Hawkeyes in a 17-14 game. I think both teams score at least 2 touchdowns in this matchup. Next up, we have the Iron Bowl, Alabama and Auburn. Alabama is by far the more superior team in this matchup. They've won 9 in a row since the loss in week 2 to Texas. Jalen Milroe is getting better each and every single week. Alabama's defense is 15th in total defense, allowing an average of 310.5 yards per game. Auburn lost last week 31-10 to New Mexico State. I want to see how Auburn responds to that loss last week. I think the first 5 to 8 minutes of this game is going to be an indication of how Auburn is handling the loss last week, because Auburn, they were the laughingstock of college football last week, losing to New Mexico State the way that they did. Right now the line is at Alabama minus 14.5. And I don't bring up the lines for every single game I do. I tend to bring up the lines that stick out to me. And this one sticks out to me a little bit. Alabama at minus 14.5. We're looking for Alabama to win by more than 2 touchdowns. Auburn has covered in their last 3 home games against Alabama. I think this game is going to feel a little bit like 2021, where Alabama, they were looking ahead to Georgia. They knew they were playing them next week, and they took Auburn lightly, and Auburn made it a game. Auburn was in that game from start to finish, but Alabama, they just got the victory. And I think this is going to be similar, despite with how well Alabama is playing. I say it a lot. In a rivalry game, you can throw out records, stats, winning streaks. You can throw everything out the window on this one, as it's going to be all settled down the field. I think Alabama wins this game, but I think Auburn might be able to cover this 14.5, and I think they will. I think Alabama only wins by 10 points. I think Auburn's going to be in this game for most of the game. I think Alabama is looking ahead to Georgia a little bit, knowing they play them next week, knowing Alabama, they control their own destiny. I think they take Auburn a little too lightly, and I think they make it close for most of the game, but I think Alabama does not have this game in the bag until the very end. Florida State and Florida, both teams will be starting their backup quarterbacks in this matchup. For Florida State, it will be Tate Rodemaker, who took over in the first quarter last week after Jordan Travis went down with an ankle injury. And he went 13 for 23, 217 passing yards, and 2 touchdown passes. They did get off to a slow start, going down 13-0 early on, but they ended up scoring 58 unanswered points in that matchup to win 58-13. And for Florida, it will be Max Brown taking over for Graham Mertz, who sustained a collarbone injury last week against Missouri, the 31-30 loss against Missouri last week on the road. And that was an opportunity to pick up a signature win for Billy Napier. And they were so close. They have another chance to upset another top 10 opponent this week in Florida State. But Florida is currently on a 4-game losing streak. Good news for Florida, though. If they can run the ball better than Florida State in this matchup, I think they have a strong chance of pulling off the upset. Montrell Johnson Jr. is averaging 5.3 yards per carry, while Trevor Etienne is averaging just under 6 yards per carry at 5.9 yards per carry. If I thought Florida was going to beat Missouri, well, if Florida would have beat Missouri last week, I would have felt like this Florida team reminds me a little bit of last year's South Carolina team. A team that did not start off great. They had some positive moments, but they hit their stride at the end of the season when South Carolina, they upset top 10 teams, Tennessee and Clemson, back-to-back to end the regular season. If Graham Mertz was in this game, I think Florida would win this game, pull off the upset of the season. I talked about in the beginning of November that I felt like there was going to be one upset that nobody sees coming. If Graham Mertz was in this game, I would say this was the upset. But I just can't see it. As Graham Mertz, despite the 4-game losing streak, he was playing pretty well, not only in those 4 games, but throughout the entire season. He's only thrown 3 interceptions this season, completing just under 73% of his passes. But I'm going to pick the Seminoles. Although if Florida won this game, I would not be surprised, but I just think in the battle of backup quarterbacks, I just think Florida State, they have the better playmakers in Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson to support Roadmaker, as well as the running game in Trey Benson. North Carolina and North Carolina State, I try to do my best towards the end of the season to pick the 7 best matchups that at the same time still has an impact on the college football playoff race. Now, this matchup does not do that. There's no college football playoff aspirations for either of these teams or conference championship aspirations. This is simply 2 8-3 win teams looking to get their 9th win of the season to get a better bowl game. North Carolina has lost 3 out of their last 5 games. North Carolina State is on a 4-game winning streak, and they have won 5 out of their last 6 games. North Carolina runs the football very well. They are towards the top in rushing offense. They are 12th in rushing offense. They are led by Omarion Hampton, who was tied for first in the FBS with Ollie Gordon II with 1,414 rushing yards. Drake May is 6th in the FBS in passing yards with 3,354. Brennan Armstrong, he took over the starting QB job again a couple of games ago. And in his last 2 games, he is completing 69.7% of his passes, 316 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. As soon as North Carolina lost to Virginia, I was starting to speculate. Is North Carolina going to completely have a bad second half of the season? As they started off strong last season, but the second half of the season is what got them. And I think that happens again. Even though North Carolina, I feel like, is a better team in this matchup than NC State, I have to go with the team I feel like is more confident, and that's North Carolina State, being winners of 5 out of their last 6 games with North Carolina, losing 3 out of their last 5. I am going with the Wolfpack in this game. I think the Wolfpack get their 9th win of the year. I think this game goes either way. It feels like a coin flip to me, but I'm going with the more confident team, and that is NC State. Kentucky and Louisville. Louisville escaped with a win on the road last week in Miami. Louisville's defense allowed 159 rushing yards last week to Miami. For Kentucky to win this game, Ray Davis has to have a massive impact in this game. Louisville's running game has been phenomenal all season long so far, with Jahar Jordan and Isaac Garendo. One of the best 1-2 combinations in college football. And I did say this last week, if it weren't for the loss against Pitt, I feel like Louisville would be labeled as this season's TCU. While many say Louisville has an outside chance of getting to the college football playoff, I don't know if I see it. I think the loss to Pitt at the end of the day is what's going to keep them out of that playoff, even if they beat Florida State in next week's ACC championship game convincingly. The current narrative for Kentucky is they can't beat a good team, as they got off to a strong start, starting off 5-0. But in their last 6 games, they have lost 5 out of their last 6, including last week to South Carolina. I do think this game comes down to which team runs the ball better in this game, and I am giving the edge to Louisville in this matchup. I just feel like with the second half of the season for Kentucky, playing the stronger teams on their schedule, they haven't performed well, and I think that continues. I think once again, Kentucky, they can't beat a good team, and I think Louisville wins this game fairly convincingly. Oregon State and Oregon in the rivalry known as the Civil War. And this is the final one due to conference realignment. At least it's the final one for the time being. Last week, Oregon State lost to Washington 22-20. And I still feel like College Game Day should have gone to Corvallis last week. I will give Oregon State credit. They held a high-octane Washington Huskies offense to just 22 points. Michael Penix Jr. had only 162 passing yards, but he did have 2 touchdown passes, and they both went to Roma Dunze. Oregon State ran the ball well against Washington. Damian Martinez had 123 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. DJU carried the ball 6 times for 53 yards. And I said last week when covering Washington and Oregon State that if Washington forced DJU to have to make plays down the field, I couldn't trust him to get it done. And DJU last week went 15 for 31, 164 passing yards, and 2 interceptions. Now Oregon State goes on the road to take on Oregon, a team that still has college football playoff aspirations. And I say this a lot in the month of November. When you're a team that still has playoff aspirations, national championship aspirations, the last team you want to face on your schedule is a team with nothing to lose. Right now, Oregon State, they have nothing to lose. They just have a lot to gain. And Oregon State will, without a doubt, be playing with a chip on their shoulder in this matchup. Oregon is a 13.5-point favorite in this ball game, and that sticks out to me because I think Oregon is able to win this game convincingly. As Bo Nix had a masterclass last week against Arizona State. Oregon has the stronger defense than Washington. Bo Nix has been protected all season long, as Oregon's offensive line is once again having a phenomenal season. Troy Franklin is having a good season as well. A better stat line than Marvin Harrison Jr., believe it or not. And Bucky Irving, strong with Oregon's backfield. I think Oregon, with their playmakers in Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, and Bucky Irving, I think they all have a strong day once again, and I think they win this game very convincingly. I think Oregon wins this game by at least 14 points. I just think with Oregon having the better defense than Washington, forcing DJU to have to make throws down the field, I can't see that on the road, especially when DJU has not thrown for over 300 passing yards in a game yet this season. I like the Ducks to win convincingly, making a statement win before the Pac-12 championship game. Wrapping things up with not only the game of the week, but the game of the season. Number 2, Ohio State, and number 3, Michigan in the game. College football playoff implications on the line. Winner of this game goes to the Big Ten title game where Iowa awaits. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but with the way Iowa has been playing this season, I think it's safe to say winner of this game advances to the college football playoff. The only thing that would make this game better is if it was in prime time and not at noon Eastern time. Ohio State took care of business against Minnesota last week, while Michigan, they got off to a quick start against Maryland, but then as the game went along, Maryland started to get back into the game, but Michigan escaped with the win. Maryland did everything they possibly could, but Michigan, they won down the stretch. And now we have a matchup with college football playoff implications on the line. The top 2 scoring defenses in college football. Michigan is first, Ohio State is second. Top 3 defenses from a stats standpoint. Michigan first in total defense, Ohio State third in total defense. Michigan is fourth in third down conversion percentage. And I bring that up because I think that will be something that sticks out in this game, as big plays tend to happen on third down. And what has cost Ohio State in the last 2 meetings is the big plays. In 2021, Ohio State allowed 297 rushing yards to Michigan, And last season, they allowed 252 rushing yards. And in the big time games Michigan has played against Ohio State and Penn State, those two opponents, Michigan, they have gotten the momentum in the game through their running game. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, they are the best 1-2 tandem in the country. The key for me in this game, can Ohio State limit the big plays? And can Ohio State establish a running game themselves? As what has cost Ohio State in the past under Ryan Day is they don't have the elite running game compared to when Urban Meyer was wearing the headset. And that will be the difference in the game for me, is Ohio State's defense can limit the big plays. And I do want to acknowledge, this is the third and final game of Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh's suspension. If Michigan wins this game, then he will be on the sidelines for the Big Ten title game. This is the biggest prediction of the season so far, as it is a top 3 matchup. I think this will be a low-scoring game. I think both defenses will hold their own. But I just think that Michigan makes one big play that Ohio State won't be able to defend. And I think that is the difference in that game. I think Michigan wins a low-scoring game, a 20-14 game, and Michigan advances to the Big Ten championship game, and with the way Iowa has been playing this season, to the college football playoff. And that will do it for my Week 13 college football predictions. If there was a game I did not predict this week that you would like my thoughts on, please leave in the comments section and I will give you a response. The NFL picks will be uploaded tomorrow for Week 12 of the NFL season. For those of you that do not watch the NFL videos, have a great Thanksgiving, enjoy the football, and I will talk to you next week.